We'll just go ahead and start. I just want to thank you, Taryn Kay. Taryn Kay is the superintendent for the Grand County School District, and she's graciously given us her time, which I know she does not have a lot of, to discuss, just give us an update on the school district. This is something that the chamber does every year. We get an update on the school district, and we usually do it for our luncheons, and then you know how everything's different in COVID world. So we are just doing a chamber chat to get our update, and we realized that this year an update it probably entails a lot more than it ever has before. So we appreciate your time and effort to share with us.
Sure.
So we're just going to turn the time over to you, whatever you feel is pertinent to just kind of update us on what's going on with the school district, reopening, and all of that. And then if we've got questions, we'll go from there.
Okay. So we are opening September 8th, which is pushed back from our traditional calendar. And that was for several reasons. One is we front-loaded our schedule with some professional development days that the state allows us to take. And that allows teachers to have some paid time to prepare for all of this, whether they're going to be teaching virtually, online kids, or whether they're going to be teaching in person with all of the new cleaning requirements and new technologies and everything like that. We wanted them to be able to have some time to learn and figure out how they're going to adapt to COVID world. And so we pushed it back. It also allows us, we're the only school district, or maybe one of two in the state, that pushed our date back to after Labor Day. It will allow us to see how the rest of the state opens. So far, it's been good pretty much everywhere in terms of we haven't seen statewide a big increase in case counts from students. And we've also wanted, the third reason we did it is we wanted our case counts to, we wanted to see what was happening in Grand County and make sure that our case count stayed low before we went ahead and reopened schools. And so right now, today, we have one active case in Grand County. And so we feel really good about that. We feel like all the preparation we've done, we can really reopen schools safely for students and staff, and we're excited to reopen schools. We have right now about 75% of our students have said that they will attend in person, and we're happy about that. It's lower than the rest of the state. The rest of the state's 80% or higher of students attending in person, at least in the districts where in person is an option. Which is everywhere except Salt Lake City. And we have about 180 kids, something like that, district-wide, who have opted for our online option. And we're really happy about that because that means we get to keep that WPU money.
Yes.
And we have about between 70 and 100 students. We're still trying to iron that out, who have opted to do homeschool independent of Grand County School District. And in those cases, we don't get to keep any of the WPU money that would have come from those students. And WPU is about $3,500. So when you multiply 70 times 3,500, it's a pretty big hit that we're taking, and we feel badly about that. We feel like we are here for the whole community through thick and thin, and we really wish that those people would have decided to stay with us during this time. But it's their choice, and we're hopeful that they'll come back to us when they feel like, you know, the time is right. So our doors are open always, and look forward to welcoming them back if that becomes a possibility for them.
And when do they do that count, that WPU count? Is it October?
We're funded in two different ways. One is called Average Daily Membership, ADM, And that really is what it sounds like. The average number of students who are enrolled in your district every day. And then at the end of the year, they take it and average it out across the days. That's the actual main way that we're funded. And then they do an October 1 head count. And that funding shows either growth or decline, right? Or status staying the same. And if we grow, then we're funded that difference between that average daily membership and our growth on October 1. If we decline, we're held harmless for 1 year. And so we won't, those students who didn't enroll with us, we won't realize that loss this year.
Right.
Next year, they'll look at our average daily membership. And so if some of those kids come back during the year, that will help us.
Right.
Then next year, they'll look at our average daily membership, and that will be our base funding. That's when we'll experience the loss. But if we've recouped those kids by next October 1st, then we stand to not be terribly impacted by all of this.
Okay.
So we'll just wait and see. Not really sure how that's going to look.
Right. Okay.
So what else? You asked about the CARES funding. We received around $220,000 in CARES funding. And we still have some of that. We're spending it mostly on PPE, gloves and masks and foggers to, sanitize, and hand sanitizers and paper towel dispensers and all the swivels that you mentioned, all the new technologies that we need to be able to provide in-person and online learning all at the same time. So that money, without that money, we would not have been able to do all the things that we're being able to do. So I'm really thankful for that funding for sure. What else did you, sorry, I got to look at my screen to see.
No, that's all right. And just because I wasn't recording before, we had a little bit of a chat before I started recording.
Yeah.
Will you expound a little bit on the equipment that you got, like the swivels that I know later, that kind of stuff for everybody?
Yeah, so we did purchase a swivel, which is basically a camera that kind of like Zoom, but what it allows is you actually use an iPad, and the iPad is on a tripod somewhere in the classroom, and the camera that is part of the swivel follows the speaker all the way around the classroom. And so if a student were commenting, the camera would go on that student. If the teacher were teaching, the camera would go on the teacher. If the display screen share was happening, it would show the student the screen, and allows for more interaction than just a typical webcam. And unfortunately, we ordered those in May, so that was good. But unfortunately, we haven't received them yet because of, I'm assuming everyone in the world's ordering them. So the latest update is that we'll have them mid-October. So we're going to start with Plan B, which is webcams and speakers. We've bought those as well, so that we will still provide live instruction to our students who are learning remotely. And then when the swivels come, we'll just put those right online. The teachers have been trained in how to use them, so we'll be about a month, just over a month without them, I think, as long as we get them in October.
Right. And that instruction is available to even the in-person students who have to stay home because they're sick or whatever it is.
Yeah, if they're sick or quarantined for, because they potentially were exposed to COVID, then they'll be able to just hop online with the regular instruction that's happening, and the theory is not miss a beat.
That's awesome.
And then come right back to school and have not missed, everything for however long they were out.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's see, you also asked about, oh, when a student has symptoms and if they're sent home and how long they're out and all of those things.
Right.
So there are lots of different scenarios that might come into play. One is if the student tests positive and, you know, not at school, like the parent takes them, they test positive. What happens to that student is they are quarantined at home for 10 days upon a positive test. And during that time, they can, if they're healthy enough, they can participate in the live streaming, you know, any of that. They can come back to school when they're symptom free and 10 days has passed and they haven't had a fever for at least 24 hours without medication.
Okay.
And that's all health department guidelines.
Right.
And so that's one scenario. Another scenario is if they're at school and they have a symptom and they're sent home, they're out 14 days and not the 10. And the reason for that is the science shows that there are 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3, you know, somewhere in that range, 2 to 4 days, where they're not, maybe they're not symptomatic yet. And so when they're sent home, the likelihood is they probably aren't going to get tested immediately, but they're out 14 days because we can't force a student to get tested. Now their parent can take them and get them tested. And if they get a negative test, they're welcome back as soon as they have that negative test. So it doesn't have to be 14 days. If they go home and parent takes them and 5 days later they get a negative test, they're welcome back right then. But if the parent decides not to take them to get tested, then they would be out the 14 days.
And when you're talking days, you're not talking school days, you're talking weekends count.
Days, yeah, just days. Mm-hmm. And then the other situation could be that another student tests positive. And so then the health department does what we call contact tracing, where in communication with the student and the parent and the teacher and the nurse at the school, we determine what students, if any, were exposed in a sustained way to that child. So that means that they were within 6 feet of that child for more than 15 minutes in an engaged kind of way. And if the health department is who is going to determine who to contact trace.
And this is even if they're wearing their masks, right?
What's that?
This is even if they're wearing their masks.
Even if they're wearing their masks. And the health department will determine that and will obviously notify those parents. And those kids too will be sent home and quarantined for 14 days. But if they go get tested and come back, you know, with a negative test, they're welcome back as soon as they have that negative test. And the other situation that could happen is a student could have symptoms, be sent home, you're out 14 days, they go to the doctor, they get a COVID test, the doctor diagnoses strep throat. Well, it's not COVID, because when you go to the doctor like that, you likely will get a more rapid test. Mm-hmm. And then you have a negative COVID test, you have a strep throat diagnosis, you're on antibiotics just like you would have been prior to COVID. As soon as your symptoms go away and you feel okay, just like always with strep throat, you're welcome back.
Okay.
So there's lots of scenarios that could happen. And
right. And can you give us a list? Can you give us a list of what symptoms the kids would be sent home for at school?
Yeah, a fever above 100.4.
Okay.
These are CDC guidelines. A persistent cough that is different than a chronic cough. If a student always has allergies or always has a cough, we're not going to send them home for something they always have.
Right.
But if it's new, persistent, isn't a typical cough that they always have, then that. A sore throat, because most kids don't always have a sore throat. And new sustained body aches, like most kids, some kids will get growing pains,
Yeah.
but they don't always have flu-like body aches.
Right.
So
They
flu-like
get
body
sore at
aches.
dance.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, if you pulled your muscle doing something, not that,
yeah.
but new flu-like body aches. And then the last one that we haven't publicized, but that will come into play, is a sudden loss of taste or smell, just
Right.
because that seems to be really associated with COVID. And that would be kind of an extreme, unusual thing for a child to suddenly lose that. And we've told parents, if your child has allergies and they've always got a runny nose, we're not going to use runny nose as our guideline, because so many kids have this, that, or the other that is a runny nose, and they always have a runny nose. And we wouldn't be able really to open schools, I think, if we used runny nose as the determinant. So just those other ones that I mentioned.
Awesome.
And, yeah.
And then can you sorry, I'm like breaking in a little bit, but
That's all right.
So I'm just curious with teachers, when teachers have to quarantine or they get sick in their home, I'm assuming you just bring in subs. Are there like certain subs for certain classes? Are you in need of subs?
Yes.
I can imagine that the sub situation is going to be.
We have some. We have about as many as we always have to start the year, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10. It's not enough.
Right.
When the river season closes, we pick up some, and they stay till the river season opens, and then we lose them, and we end the year with about 10. So we currently are in need of subs.
So that's your plug. What can people do to, be a sub? I don't know if there's a certain amount of pay, but.
Yeah, they can come to the district office and put in an application to be a sub. They have to have a background check and fingerprints, all of those things. And the pay is on the website. And so they can check and, see if it's something that they're wanting to do. But it's nice because they don't have to work every day. They probably could work every day if they chose to, but if there are days where, they've got to run to Junction or whatever, they get to pick and choose when they work. They can also choose where they work. If they're, they don't want to work at the preschool because they're not quite sure what to do with 3-year-olds, or vice versa. They don't want to work at the high school because they're not quite sure what to do with teenagers. They can pick. So it's a good job for somebody that just wants, some sometimes work and wants to call their shots in terms of their schedule. But we could definitely use some subs. So back to your question about what will we do if it's a teacher. Again, several scenarios. If the teacher is somebody who's contact traced, like they have no symptoms, and they're quarantined, they could potentially teach from home. So as long as they have the technology, which we'll make sure they do, what we would do is have a sub in the room, but the actual teacher could provide Zoomed instruction, which would be something that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do in the past, right?
Awesome, yeah.
And so there's that. But if the teacher's home sick and they can't, then we would have a sub like always. And the sub would be delivering the instruction. And if our subs are all used up, then we would put a teaching assistant who works in the school in that classroom. And then last resort would be, we would split the kids up who are there in person amongst the other teachers that are still there.
Right.
And one of the questions everyone always asks is, how many cases does it take till you close?
Yes.
Or how many cases is an outbreak? And so we've defined 3 cases in any one classroom as an outbreak. And at that point, we would close that classroom for 2 weeks. And
Okay.
that would just give those kids a chance to, you know, go away and be home and recover. If in a school, 15 cases. So if we had 15 cases in any one school, we would close that school again for 2 weeks and wait for that case count to come down. Our hospital's in really good shape for being able to handle cases. We have 1 active case, no hospitalizations. So we feel pretty good about those numbers. And we've only had, what, 54 total cases
Right.
since March. And so if we see a big bump, then we'll react accordingly. But we're confident that we can keep schools open. That's one of the biggest requests from parents is please don't open and close and open and close and open and close. So we'll do our best. I think the virus will dictate that to some extent, but we'll do the best we can.
And in the case that a classroom closes or the school closes, the instruction can still go on through the Zoom, right?
Yep.
If the teacher's
Totally. Yeah, if the classroom closes and the teacher's able to provide instruction, she'll just go virtual and do he will do the remote instruction
right.
For that length of time. If they're not able to, then another staff member will.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, do you have anything else for us as far as reopening and guidelines? I think everybody knows by now you've got to wear a mask. Are masks being provided?
Yeah.
Are there certain, masks that I know that there was a little bit of change with the shields and and all of that?
Yeah, we're trying to, one of the things that has frustrated people is the changing plans.
Right.
But it is what it is because we're trying to follow the science, and we are trying to follow what the health department, both the state health department and our local health department, advise us to do. We feel like they're the medical experts. And so the governor's latest guidelines on masks is what we're following, and that is that regular face masks are far and away the best. They can be made out of cloth. If they're made out of cloth, then double-sided is better than single. But we are providing multiple face masks for each child. They're cloth, they're really great. We have 3 per student. Plus we have a lot of disposable masks if anybody forgets one or loses it or eats it or, whatever happens. We're also providing them for staff. Parents ask a lot, can we provide our own? Yeah, you can. Face shields were a thing for a minute where we were going to allow those, and now we can only allow those in cases where there's a child who has an IEP who has a disability that really requires that they wear a face mask or a face shield instead of a mask. Maybe somebody who's autistic and tactily defensive or whatever, or a teacher can wear it if the instruction that they're providing is critical for that student to be able to see the mouth, like speech language instruction, initial reading, where we're actually showing students what shape their mouth should be in to produce a certain sound. So you won't see very many face shields. Then the other guidance, we originally had bandanas in our plan, we're okay. The governor has come out and said no bandanas, so we've taken that out. Oddly, they did leave that gaiters were okay. So for now, gaiters are still in our plan. But the guidance is that masks are better than gaiters, and for a lot of reasons. But gaiters we're allowing gaiters. So masks and gaiters, and then face shields in, rare situations.
Right. And then another change that just came about recently was the later start time, the bell schedule.
Oh yeah. So the middle and the high school actually have wanted to go to a later start time for years. There's a lot of really good research that adolescents do much, much better with sleeping in later in the morning. And so one of the, COVID has a few upsides to it. And we're taking advantage of those everywhere we can find them. And this is one of them, where we get a chance to try a later start time and see. Because the governor did say that we could not have to do the full 990 hours. We got a waiver for that. So the middle and high school are going to try it and see if our attendance improves and if student achievement improves. And so we're excited about it. So middle and high school will start at 8:45 and HMK start time is unchanged. It will still start at 8:15. Buses are still available. Oh, I know one change that I could talk about. In the past, we have published our bus routes in the newspaper. And this year we've elected not to because our transportation director attended a national transportation conference and discovered that we are one of the only districts, even in Utah, that publishes our bus route information in such a public way. And she was really cautioned against doing that because you're putting information out really widely about where students, sometimes unsupervised, are congregated. Right. And if anybody had any kind of not good plans, they've got ready access to our students. And when she came and told me that, that was just an easy decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to advertise those to the parents. So parents will know where their child's bus stop is and what time and all of that. But we are not publishing it in the paper. And so if there are questions about why, that's why.
Awesome. Oh, that's great.
Just seems safer.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never thought of that before.
I was gonna say, I don't think I would have ever thought of it, but yeah, when you say it, it makes sense for sure.
Yeah, so there's that, and then the other upside of COVID, I have to say, is some of us have a hypothesis that this will be the healthiest year we've ever seen, rather than, this COVID sick year, because schools typically, people call them petri dishes, right? And if you're in a school, you have a great immune system generally.
Yeah.
But now we've got masks and hand washing and hand sanitizing and all the things that usually are shared amongst all the kids. There are some doctors who are saying they really think that we'll see less illness and not more.
Right.
So,
well, and I would add to, at least to me, it seems like all of the virtual learning and instruction is also a plus. I mean, I think it's great that, a kid can still I don't know if it's going to be recorded for a later time, but, even if kids could go and watch that instruction later and be like, oh, right, that's what that's
there's definitely some upsides to that, right? Like if their teacher had their lesson recorded and the kid forgot how to do something at home, or they could log into a different teacher gave the same lesson that day.
Right. Right. So I can see a lot of really good potential with that. I think I kept that as an upside. Probably not, teachers are probably pulling their hair out. My mom's a teacher and I know she's pulling her hair out, but
it's, we're asking our teachers to do much more than we ever had, and they already do so much.
Yeah.
It's a really big ask to ask them to teach in person and online all at the same time. And we believe that it's better for kids to be in person.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't trying to work ourselves out of in-person jobs because we feel like it's so important for kids to have that instruction in person. But I do think there's some upsides with what we're going to learn for sure.
Right.
We'll be better instructors because of it.
Right. And that leads to another good thing that happened this week, and that's that the teachers did get their raises, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that was great. We did lose money because of COVID at the legislative level. We were supposed to get this big 6% increase on the WPU, and they ended up giving a 1.8% increase. But at the same time, we received funding called administrative costs, and only small districts receive that. And it's to help with all of the things you have to do administratively that other districts have large staffs to take care of. But they cut that funding. And so for us, it was a wash. The 1.8 increase in the administrative cost decrease was a complete, almost dollar for dollar negation. So we didn't actually receive any increased funding. So that happened. And also the board discovered, which is in the Times this week, that the former business administrator didn't budget for some salaries in last year's budget. And we don't know why, but given that decrease in that, we then had to account for that in next year's budget, and then the state funding falling through. Given the two of those situations, the district was having to pull from its fund balance, savings account basically, to create the budget. And the board, they never decided not to do raises, but they had one meeting where they had talked about it, and several of them expressed some pretty serious concerns about having to dip into the fund balance to that level. But given what the work that the current business administrator is doing, and my pledge to really look at district finances with a fine-tooth comb this year, and look at priorities for funding, and look at if we need to make cuts going into next school year, what those might look like. Given everything we're asking teachers to do, they went ahead and approved it. They support teachers. They always wanted to, but they also have to be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. So, but they felt good about it, and we did have the money, to do it. It's not a financial crisis by any stretch. So we'll spend this year looking at our budget and making sure it's where we want it to be, and that we're funding what we want to fund, and move forward from there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I'm just gonna look at the questions you asked me, make sure that I hit them all. I think I did.
I think so.
Our enrollment, we're not too far down from where we were. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 1425. We're usually between 14 and 15. We won't really know till after school starts.
Right.
What our enrollment is.
Though.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, the information,
you're welcome.
all the work that you guys have put in over the summer. I have kids, and I appreciate, and I know how hard you guys have worked to make this year, as good as possible for them.
Yeah.
And even during the spring, during the emergency of it all, I appreciate everything that was done there to, stay afloat. And so thank you. From me as a parent, from us as a chamber, we know that you guys are working your tails off and doing important work, and we are grateful for it.
Oh, thanks, Laici. Appreciate it.
All right. You have a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.